So the final session for today will be a panel with representatives from industry, education and research, facilitated by one of our Learning Lab chief investigators, Professor Jason Mattingly. Before we get to that though, just take 5 minutes break, stretch, get yourselves ready just while we prepare for the panel. Thank you.
Should we start? Good to go. Okay, folks, hope you've all had a chance to stretch your legs. Might get everyone to take a seat and we'll get started. We're just a little bit behind time, so I might ramp up the pace slightly. So yeah, my name's Jason Mattingly. I'm a professor here at UQ. I have a joint appointment between the Queensland Brain Institute and the School of Psychology. And I'm basically interested in how the brain regulates our behavior, regulates our cognition. So I'm interested in things like attention, decision-making, learning and memory, metacognition. I've worked with Dr. Natasha Matthews on metacognition. I collaborate with Paul Dux, who's on our panel here. So that's me, that's what I'm interested in. I've had a connection with the UQ Learning Lab for many years. I was one of the original CIs on the Science of Learning Research Centre here at UQ, and I've worked closely with Anne-Marie and with Steph and many other people here in education as well. So the goal, I think, of the panel discussion today is to get some of the thoughts and reflections from our, particularly our industry partners and our education partners, but also have Paul and Steph talk a little bit about their perspectives on being researchers and developing these partnerships with education and industry. So maybe what we'll do to begin with is I might ask the people who have not been introduced yet to introduce themselves, maybe who you are, where you're from, what area you represent, and we might just go along from this side. So I might ask Rodo first to introduce himself briefly, just maybe a minute or two each.
Okay. Probably somewhat introduced already through some of the presentations, but yeah, Rodo DeBoer. I'm with the Resources Training Council. The Resources Training Council is a peak industry body, so all things training in the resources sector, so largely mining and in the oil and gas space. I've landed in that role as a result of 30 plus years in mining. Started off as a miner myself and then progressed up through the ranks. And I guess I'm really excited, one, to be here today, but to be able to establish this partnership with UQ, because I think it's really important for our industry. As Steph had mentioned in her presentation, we're still hurting people, we're still killing people, we're a high-risk industry. A lot of studies have been done in the safety side, very specific, but not a lot in the, the learning and the training side, which is the key enabler to get safe outcomes. And organisations talk about safety, they talk about production, but they don't really understand the key drivers or the levers that you need to pull to achieve that. So this is very exciting for me. I think we can collaborate to get a fantastic outcome for the industry as a whole.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Rodo. Maybe just we'll stick with our industry partners for a moment, and Rohan, maybe you'd be happy to just introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rohan Batts from MARTA Education. I'm the Manager of Education there. MARTA Education has, I guess, 3 different areas that it runs in terms of clinical education and also education for non-clinicians. So we have our certificate and diploma programs for undergraduates who come in, and they're things like Diploma of Nursing, Certificate of Healthcare. And then we have our clinical programs where we have graduate programs for clinicians. And then we have our in-hospital simulation training. So we do a lot of sim work across the whole hospital, both within our sim labs, but also within the wards, doing sim training, and Chase talked about that at length. So we have a diverse range of learners. We have a diverse range of expertise in those learners, and we have a diverse range of opportunities to learn. So our real sort of flagship is simulation learning. That's something we're really interested in developing. We've worked a lot to build designs of simulation learning. We think would work quite well. But what we're really excited about with the Learning Lab is to really understand how we measure those and then refine them. And we're particularly excited to understand if they build self-regulation skills in our learners. And it'll be very interesting to be able to tease it out and measure that as we go.
Great, thanks very much, Rohan. And we might come back in the line to Natasha now. Yeah.
Hear me?
Yes.
Fabulous. Okay, all right. I'm Natasha Mayne and I'm the manager of independent teaching and learning at Independent Schools Queensland, and we've had a number of our schools here today, and it's been really wonderful to see the work that is going on in the sector. We are the peak membership body for independent schools in Queensland, and we are a member-based organisation. So we are a sector, but we are not a system, so we have absolutely no stick. And the wonderful work that our schools that you've seen presented here today, that's off the bat of really great people in our schools doing really great work. So it's a wonderful sector to be in, and it's been great to have partnership with Steph and her team here at UQ. I actually first became involved with Steph's work and her team's work a few years ago now, when I was an assistant principal in a school and I was responsible for teaching and learning across the whole school. And we had some declining numeracy results and we wanted to do something about it. So our head of maths and one of our gun maths teachers teamed up with Steph. We had a UQ partnership through QCEC as well. And they went gangbusters on the science of learning, and no surprises from what we've heard today. Spaced and retrieval practice saved the day, and those numeracy results went up for NAPLAN and for QCS, and it was fabulous. So I guess those early successes then when I moved over to ISQ were a real, I guess, a catalyst for me to want to continue that kind of partnership, because we're a very small team at ISQ. Half of us in my team are actually here today, so it's me and Edwin. So being able to partner with Steph's team and her work here at UQ has been absolutely crucial for us to actually get that, I guess, breadth and scope across the sector, because we certainly can't do all of that work on our own. But there's a beautiful synergy there, Steph, because the work that my team does, it is completely underpinned by cognitive science, and that is our core knowledge base for everything that we do with our schools. But it's great to have, I guess, a big sister alongside as well. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. And Deanne.
Hi, my name is Deanne Clark and I'm representing Queensland Government Schools today. I'm from Brisbane State High School and we're delighted to be here. We have engaged with the Learning Lab since 2019, and for us at Brisbane State High School, it's a very large school. We have 3,400 students from year 7 to 12 from 78 different backgrounds with 240 teaching staff. And if you add in our parents, you have about a community of 10,000. We are very high achieving, and we hold our head up high to say that that's something that we honour and believe in. We accept and are very committed to making sure that our students have continued to grow with that. So we had huge results when we were in our OP, overall position system, and our desire to commit and connect with the Learning Lab was specifically for the move to QCE and our ATAR system. We were committed to making sure that we were going to grow and sustain those levels of achievement that we have. And incredibly, the results continue the way that they have for a number of years. And we're very proud of the results of our students, both in academic achievement and also the achievement that they fulfill as Year 12 students and enter with really lovely, wonderful characters and personalities.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Deanne. We might just continue along. So I'll ask my colleague, Professor Paul Dux. Rohan, you might like to pass the mic across. So Paul.
Thanks, Jason. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Dux. I'm a professor here in the School of Psychology. I'm a psychologist by training, but I think my work kind of goes really across psychology and neuroscience. I'm interested in basic cognitive processes, attention, memory, but very much so in learning. How can we enhance cognition, both through training protocols and also through other approaches like brain stimulation, and also trying to use non-invasive brain imaging techniques to be able to look at individual differences across humans and predict what are the best outcomes for different individuals. That's very much kind of at the pure end of the work that I do, but I'm also across a number of areas where we translate our work. I was an original member or chief investigator in the Science of Learning Research Centre. So obviously we started to branch out our work into schools and various other educational settings. I also do work with the military as well in terms of training and trying to facilitate skill development in that setting. We've also done work in healthcare settings as well. So yeah, I'm very much interested in learning across the full gambit from in the lab right up to the real world, looking for different efficacious approaches to doing that.
I didn't think you'd get that in, but you did. Well done, Paul. Thank you. There's just a little in-joke between us. And maybe, Steph, just briefly, would you like to reiterate who you are and what you do?
I wasn't expecting to ask that.
That's right. It was a surprise question. But in
knowledge and experience and passion comes from, and just feel really honoured to be with all these amazing people and very proud of all of my schools and things. Yeah,
Fantastic.
it's wonderful to be here.
That's right. Well, we'll hear some more in a moment, I hope. So look, the plan now is I'm going to start with sort of directing a few questions at you folk, but then in the long run, the idea is that we'll get some interaction from members of the audience or give you an opportunity to ask some questions as well. And so maybe we can start, and I think particularly directed to our industry and our education partners. So, you know, what we've heard here today is it's time consuming. There's a cost involved in getting into researching in your area. And so the question is, on the flip side, what do you see yourselves getting out of this process? And, you know, just to get you to think about this and focus a little bit, you know, what would you say are the most, I guess, the most important aspects of having these partnerships, this research industry, research education partnership, and what have been some of the main challenges that you've faced over the last year, 2, 3 years in kind of building this partnership with the research sector? And anyone can feel free to jump in.
Okay. For us, the main thing we want out of this is that we want a reliable measure that our simulation education is working, basically. Now, the way we measure it at the moment is that we do sim education in a particular problem area, let's say intubation, and then we track whether or not that reduces the problem, if you like, the incidence of issues in the area. Now, you know, speaking to a lot of the clinical facilitators, what they view as the number one thing that a clinical facilitator should end with after they go through simulation, or a learner should end with after they go through simulation, is self-regulation, is the ability to make decisions under pressure, is the ability to respond to stress, and then in the next simulation, get better at it. And then when they go on the ward, get better at it. And really, we would like to have a reliable measure of that actually occurring. That's very easy to say and very hard to do. And Chase and Alex and Emery and Stephanie have been able to unlock some of the secrets that enable us to have that sort of have that measure. The other thing we want out of it is we have standard practices that we think work in a clinical environment, standard methodologies of delivery. So we have, you know, we have the what's called the preceptor model in medical education and bedside teaching. We have other models like ask, tell, ask again, tell again, sort of in feedback delivery, all designed for clinical teaching practice. But we want to be quite sure that they're doing the job. And so that's what we want out of it as well. So we really want to be able to measure education and the impact of it and the outcome of it. You know, just by way of an example, I was in a sim recently, watching a simulation recently where it was an identical simulation. Basically what was happening is a patient was going into anaphylactic shock because of an IV drip, and one group came in and the guy was completely in control. You know, the clinical practitioner was completely in control of the situation. Another group came in and they lost control completely of the sim. So that's just an example to show you how important it is to know if self-regulation is working. But the other thing I think we also wanted, and Chase talked about this, was team cohesion and the so-called soft skills. Now they're called soft skills in a kind of derogatory sense, almost. And they shouldn't be, of course, because they're very important. And knowing that, and a lot of simulation is trying to unpack in debriefing if you have worked in a team, kind of in a cohesive team, but we need probably a more reliable measure that cohesion is happening and continuing to happen, because it is the basis for quite a few mistakes. And so that's what this gives us.
Fantastic, thank you. And maybe Rodo, we could follow up with you, also industry, but very different industry. From your point of view, you know, the motivations and some of the challenges in embarking on a research partnership?
Absolutely, and I think with my introduction, I sort of articulated the motivation is around we're hurting people and killing people. So that's a pretty good motivator to do something different. I guess the challenge is getting the industry to understand the importance of getting behind this, because it does take time, it does take resources, and I guess the early phases of our partnership meetings and now starting to get out to site is building up a good narrative around it. And what has been fantastic, which you all just saw earlier, the video, it's building a really good narrative that I can take back to industry to say, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, and this is what's in it for you. But ultimately, for me and for the industry, because I've been in the industry for such a long time and I've worked with such a diverse group of organisations, most organisations have an appetite to do things differently or better, you know, but a lot of them don't know where to start. Or a lot of organisations will do certain aspects of their learning or training in their organisation well, and other aspects really poorly. The other issues that you are faced with, some have really large budgets and some have very small budgets. So I guess the whole purpose behind this and my blue sky end result from this partnership is to present back to industry a good practice guide. This is what good looks like when you're engaging your employees to get best possible outcomes when you're teaching them, when you're training them. If we can provide a guide, now we're not going to dictate that you must follow it, but it gives the organisations out there the opportunity to understand what good looks like and then how they can implement components of that to improve. Now, we're very mindful there isn't a silver bullet out there, but we can certainly make a big difference. And this is a real opportunity to provide a good guide for industry to improve their practices when it comes to engaging their employees and training their employees. And hopefully that we're going to see a lot more people go home uninjured, unhurt, And that's the main goal.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thank you. Maybe we can switch to our educators now and get your perspectives on these two questions, right? One is about your motivation to be involved in research partnerships. And the other one is really, what are the challenges that you've experienced, or maybe challenges you can see on the horizon? Either of you, feel free.
I think ours came from quite the opposite that was just mentioned. We came from wanting the research partnership because our students were so high achieving. And when we swapped to QCE, we were very aware of our community who also wanted to keep and maintain and grow that. So I and now have a wonderful privilege to lead professional learning at Brisbane State High School. And in that role, I have a love and a passion for science of learning, but also for research. So when we have a look at our entire professional learning framework and our impact and where we see and design that for our staff, this particular partnership is very important for us, and it's one of our key parts to engage our staff and give them that opportunity to connect as well. So our team that presented here today, they were our second team who have been involved in a partner school project with UQ, and the impact for us has been quite substantial. So in the very, very first year, we particularly just looked at with MAP at retrieval and space. We started this in 2017, 2 years prior to QCE coming in. So we already had Jared Horvath, and someone mentioned him today. He presented for us in 2017. So we were ready and committed and connected from quite an early time. And since then, we have almost collected our own multidisciplinary researchers that we engage with now. So for us, at our school, for feedback, it's Cam Brooks. For learning scientists, it's Megan Sumeraki, and we are committed and worked with Megan for a number of years. In fact, when she came out here to Australia and presented for us, Jack and Steph came and joined into that presentation at our school. So, but it wasn't just for our staff. We saw the importance of our community. So at all times, we are thinking staff first was always our thought first. But at all times, with the impact for the students, of course, but where we put our PD first was to our staff. However, the community as well. So we had parent community opportunities to engage, and we had student opportunities to engage. We really value that, putting that thought leader in front of our community, and we don't do it once. So 4 years we have had those partnerships with, well, since 2017, but in particular, the people that we have decided to engage with, for us, that's been a big 4-year project, and it's designed for that impact. So when we did hit COVID, we'd already had Dr. Megan Sumeraki in Brisbane at Brisbane State High School. Then in 2021 and 2020 as well, she then did everything online and recorded for us as well. We have a website, and on our website we have a page specifically for parents, and on that is all these recorded opportunities and artifacts and resources, because it's very important for us that the community is involved as well, and they get to hear that wonderful language. And our other very big part of our work is with Dr. Andrew Martin, and I need to quote him as an educational psychologist from Lifelong Achievement, because that's how he comes to work with us, is in that role, not at his university role. But that's really large for us, and our challenge is the size of our school, but we have scaled up substantially this year, but and we're very proud of that scale up. This year we had, last year, Dr. Cam Brooks was one of our research in evidence, one of our research in expertise for the whole year. This year was with Dr. Andrew Martin, and we scaled that to include 500 parents registered to listen to Dr. Andrew Martin, 1,000 online, 3,400, every single student had an opportunity to connect with Andrew and our entire staff. So when we scale up at State High, we scale up, but this partnerships, I think, is one of the great strengths of our school, and this particular partnership enables our staff to continue to come and be involved, and extremely important because their work then throughout faculty is just wonderful to measure and grow.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And Natasha, your
Okay,
perspectives as well.
I'll start with the challenges, and you may never invite me back again, but I think, you know, to put it into the broader context, when an organisation such as mine and, you know, the work that Steph's team does as well, we're trying to support schools, to support the teachers, to support the students so that, you know, we're getting really great learning outcomes, and we're making sure that teachers are working really effectively, and because we know that there are issues with, you know, teacher burnout and wellbeing. There are some really, really wicked problems in education, and that's even before you even look at the nation's student outcomes in terms of academic results. This is where you may never invite me back again, Steph, but I think if we rewind back to one of the really significant challenges is in terms of our teacher training. The kind of knowledge base that we've been sharing here today is, I firmly believe, should be embedded into teacher training. It's way too late for me. I'm in my 5th decade on the planet, but I still have hope. And I think that when you're dealing with a profession of teachers are incredibly well-intentioned people. We genuinely care about our kids, we care about each other, but we have not been adequately prepared to do this incredibly complex, challenging job. And so they're the kinds of issues that we face, my team, when we go into schools. They're overloaded. This could be seen as another bright, shiny thing, but we know it is the thing. And how you actually support schools to actually stop doing all the other, I'll call it nonsense, Jason, and to actually then focus down on the stuff that is most likely to improve student outcomes. And also, I honestly think improve student wellbeing, because this is about working more efficiently with a greater sense of purpose, I think. So there's some of the challenges, I think, when we do go out into schools. But what I have really appreciated with UQ is that really great understanding of the complexity of what goes on in our schools, what our teachers are facing all the time. And in our sector, they're incredibly diverse schools. And some of them do have very significant challenges. And you've always approached that with a great deal of empathy, you and your team, and I think that is absolutely key. But you are armed with this gold standard research. And as we've seen here today, schools and teachers are hungry for this. They really do want to hear and learn about this, and they want to know how to make it work in their context. So that there's challenges, they're deep and they're wicked, but I see the work that your team, Steph, has helped facilitate and that we've seen shared here today as a really big shining light. So thank you.
Fantastic, thank you.
I just
You can
reply?
go ahead.
You can come back anytime and say that we need the science. I think what you were getting at was we need the science of learning in our undergraduate teacher training program. I think that's what you were saying. We have it in our mouth, but that's too late. Well, it's not too late, but yeah, you can come back anytime.
So thank you. Fantastic insights. Great to hear all of those. It's all a bit too positive though, so I'm going to go off script for a moment and ask you, our industry and education partners in particular, what do you find frustrating about researchers and research? Because, you know, here we are, we're in these ivory towers, you know, we try to oversimplify every problem, we try to control everything. What's frustrating about working with people like us? You know, what are the things you wish you could change? And I can see Rodo's already just about jumping out of his skin. So what do you find, and by the way, you might want to temper this because I'm going to ask our two researchers, what do they find frustrating about working with teachers? And
now, I've got a really good example here, and I think this is also just kudos to UQ. In a former role, in a former organisation, I had a partnership with a university. I'm not going to name names, but and we were hoping to do some good work. Not in the learning space that we're doing, in a different space, but still within the resources mining sector. The biggest challenge I had, and ultimately that relationship fell over because of their approach. Their approach was that They knew the problems and they knew the solutions, and that's why you need us. But also the biggest challenge of all was they didn't have the ability to effectively translate the academia into layman's terms that related to the industry and ultimately people on the shop floor that were affected by the research. That fell over big time. The big difference, and where I think it's just, I'm absolutely amazed on how well the partnership is going with UQ, because Steph and the entire team hasn't come to our meetings or to our sites professing to know everything. They're very inquiring, very humble, wanting to understand what the problems are, and have a fantastic ability to translate the early learning and the research into layman's terms that everyone just gets it. So look, I couldn't speak more highly of the, I guess, the relationship and the partnership, and it's very early days, but from what we're doing with UQ is completely the opposite from experiences I've had in the past. And so if you continue on in this manner, the opportunities to engage with so many more industries are significant.
Great, thank you. What about from the education side? We're super frustrating. Come on, you're making this all too nice. What is it, or maybe about researchers generally? You don't have to point at us, but I mean, what makes it a challenge to work with researchers who are sitting in their labs, for example, in a university?
You know, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it's an opportunity. I can't see it as a challenge, because having a partnership for us like this, we've come back for us, this is 4th year since we've come between the two of ours, and we came back because it's such a wonderful opportunity to connect, but also because we are very aware in education that there are lots of shiny new ornaments that can be added to your Christmas tree, and if you're not careful, you'll grab them all and put them on. And so what we have been very mindful about, and what we're very lucky about, I think, at Brisbane State High School, is our leadership team are research based for everything that they want to do. So we come from a culture of why is that so? And if we are not sure on some research, there is a number of wonderful people in our science faculty who help us to go through that. And also we have a team here. So if we're ever unsure of something, or I want to ask a question, I never hesitate to ring. I can ring and ask Steph any question. It doesn't matter, even if it feels silly, or do I like this, or why they've said this in this research, or tell me why they have written that. So I'm not concerned or nervous to ask a question, because it's not something that I'm uber good at, but there are people who are. So I don't get concerned about that, but I do trust my people, and we have been very selective at State High in who our people are. And that's helped us to make a strong culture and deliver pretty cool outcomes for our kids.
Thank you. Well, maybe we'll flip it around now. So Steph, you're coming out looking way too good in this, Steph. So I'm going to go to Paul and ask Paul, thinking about the challenges as researchers. So for people who are visiting who don't know much about the university environment, a small fraction of what most of us do is we teach, we get up and we give lectures, but it's a tiny fraction of our week. The vast majority is doing research and supervising PhD students and things. And so when we have opportunities to collaborate with industry partners and education partners, that's out of our comfort zone, and it's almost like an add-on to our core business, where it's about publishing papers and getting grant funds. They're the things that would get us promoted at the university. So what are the challenges, Paul, in working with partners outside the university sector?
Well, I mean, I think just talking about partnerships generally, and we also collaborate within our university and across other universities as well. I mean, I think if you don't come at it, and I think Rodo touched on this, from a place of humility and respect, it's almost a complete disaster. So no teacher's ever going to want to have a psychologist come and say, I know what your problems are. I'm here to solve them. That sounds ridiculous. Also ridiculous in a mining setting as well, and certainly in a military setting. I mean, every environment has its own culture. It has its own language. And so, you know, I think without those things initially, it's always really, really challenging. And unfortunately, the people who are here don't fall into those categories, otherwise it just wouldn't have got off the ground. I think also one of the big challenges for researchers, and I think it's also a big challenge as well for people in industry, because often both camps aren't determining timescale. So there's bigger powers who are determining what the time course is in terms of outcomes. So most, you know, one talks about blue sky research versus, you know, translating research. I mean, that can take, you know, years, decades. I mean, and I think sometimes, I think both cases would like more time, but that's just not going to work that way. I mean, no one's going to be able to say to an education department, you know, in 15 years, we really might be able to have impact in the classroom. And certainly in a mining setting, you're not going to be able to convince someone who's, you know, literally profitability that time scale is going to work. But again, I think that's a challenge for both people. But personally, that's the thing I find hardest is when there's, you know, you're looking for translation in like a couple of years' time. So that's really challenging.
Thanks very much. I think probably it's time to open this up so that we can get some audience participation and some audience questions as well. So, you know, we've heard a lot. We've heard from our researchers here at the university. We've heard from partner schools, all the amazing things that are happening out there. You know, I guess I'm interested in finding out what are some of the things that you found particularly interesting about the proceedings today, or something you found that's surprising that had not occurred to you before, that you would like to discuss, get answers to, get the opinions of our panelists on. It's really over to you. It's open. Be as provocative as you like.
Hi, I think it's wonderful to hear about like the motivations for building the partnership and then what the outcomes could be. But I think some of the challenges is sometimes maintaining that too, because everyone has competing demands and other overseeing bodies that require different things of you. How do you feel, or what's your opinion on how best to maintain these partnerships and keep them ongoing and working so that you can have these outcomes?
I think one of the factors is probably to answer your question, but it's also to Paul, that timescale is the problem. If there is too much time before delivering anything, I think those partnerships and relationships fall over. So I think it's important to try and strike the balance between the feedback and delivery, even if it's just small increments, and being able to trial things along the way, but keeping the partners well informed in where you're at, what you're doing. Some of the early findings, it doesn't have to be definitive, but I think especially, you know, if I'm speaking just from a mining sector, they can be impatient. You know, things happen very quickly in the industry. So you've got to keep them well informed, but you also got to give something back. And if it's information or products, even if they're not a final product, keeping the ball moving, because you will lose people very, very quickly if it's all about the research. And if we're sitting here in 2 years' time or 3 years' time and we're still just researching and we've given nothing back, there won't be another partnership or a relationship in the future.
That's a really important point. And it's true that the time horizons for researchers are often measured in decades. And often we go into problems, we tackle problems without even expecting that we'll have an answer in our own academic lifetimes. So that's a very unrealistic perspective to take when we have partnerships where there needs to be an impact sort of early. And what I'm also hearing is communication is absolutely critical, that sort of two-way communication. Steph, you were
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly the same thing. As researchers, you kind of want to hold on to it until it's exactly right to share back. So it is finding that happy medium between yes, I'm comfortable in sharing this, these findings or these ideas, and but still having some kind of rigor around that process. I think that is a tension. But I've made a mental note. Don't take too long to get information back to Rodo.
I'll just add, I'm just thinking community of practice model. It just seems, for example, Chase and Alex have come in and we've introduced them to clinical directors and we've introduced them to nurse educators and the nursing students, and all of those people have had questions and interest in the research, and all of them are asking me about it, and they're asking Alex and Chase about it. And 1 minute of a conversation I might have with a clinical director will be about that research. We'll touch on it. So there's a community of practice. From what I understand, you've got the core guys, and then you've got layers of people. And this seems to be what has happened in MARTA. Is it started with me and the core group, reaching out to the Science of Learning Research Centre or Learning Lab, and then it's just sort of I guess layered on top of that and continues to do.
Paul, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just want to touch on like the timeline stuff, because I think what that comes back to is like with any relationship, communication is very important, because it's not like one size fits all. I mean, even within one organization. So for example, I think about funding and projects, Jason, that you and I have been engaged with the military. Some of those are, we want a product this year, we want a product in 3 years, and other things are blue sky research. Like, can you simulate sleep in someone's brain while they're awake? That's not going to be rolled out in 3 years. These are and there are different grants at different levels of those organizations. But again, you need to communicate early. And I think that's a strength of some collaborations here, is that, it's important to be upfront in terms of what are the goals, tractable problems. It might be different for, one mining company, it might be for a different mining company or a different organization within those things, and certainly for education as well.
Right. Thank you. Are there questions from the audience? Just up the back here.
Thank you very much for everyone's involvement today. It's been really informative and exciting. I think it's probably you're going to give me the same answer that you've just given the last two people about communication, but I just wanted to ask a question to see if there was anything else that you wanted to add. We've heard today about stakeholders on both sides of the partnerships coming in and finding that their expectations change, particularly in the first couple of weeks. We heard that Steph's expectations about the cognitive side with the mining change to a slightly more cultural, and we've heard similar stories from the educators as well. Just wanting to know if coming into a partnership like this with specific goals that then change, how that might be managed as you navigate the partnership.
Okay. Just really quickly, I think it's just a process of being open to the possibility that something may evolve in a different way. Because all of our schools, when they come to us at the beginning of the year with their project ideas, like all of our PhD students and like I was, they want to change the world. It's this big, and they get a little disgruntled when we say, no, keep narrow, 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 narrow. So I think that's just a natural part of the design process. Like Jason was talking about, it's that iterative ideation that's constantly refining and refocusing. But, if I guess a little bit like what Paul was saying, if they do come in with a very specific thing, as long as that's clearly communicated at the beginning and you're open and honest about whether or not that is a realistic and achievable objective, and whether you have the skill set around that to be able to achieve it, I think that's important as well. But I think for all of us, or for most people, there is a recognition that ideas do shape and evolve over time. And, you know, I've had many conversations with Chase about how these sorts of partnerships take a long time and they involve a lot of conversation. And that's what I think is really crucial to these sorts of projects. And if you don't want to invest in that time and in those conversations, then maybe it's not for you. I'm not to you, Dan. But, you know.
I think Rohan wants to.
That is. I think it's such a big challenge. And I've heard a lot today about how you embed things, and you can't embed something if your goal's changing all the time. So at some point you do have to say, we're sticking with it, we're going with it, and we're backing it. And that I think is quite tricky to do in education where there's lots of variables involved. But I think what we've been able to do and work out is we could be on a winner. This seems to be reliable measurement, and let's push it through. But I think, yes, you've got to be very careful about continuing to change goals. Yeah.
I mean, we're
Can
at
I
the
add
time.
one more?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to add from our side of selecting our faculty was a big part of it before we engaged with the Partner School project. So we were quite deliberate in which faculty we thought from the leadership team would best benefit for their own faculty, as well as then sharing that in a larger school. And that was particularly so with the first and with our second group too. So the team that we have here for this year, they have great knowledge. Nat's about to finish her master's, and Aliska has so much knowledge of the digital platform EP as well. So we were very deliberate in that, and Gay is the head of department in that science faculty. So connecting that team and knowing the people that we asked and said, we think you would love this, why, you know, come and join in. That was also quite, I think, important from our side as well, as we came to join from that. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask one final kind of maybe provocative question to the panel, but also the audience, and that is, what we've heard here is we've got these really complex, sort of long-term gnarly problems in education and in industry. And in a way, what this is sort of trying to solve some of these problems at a grassroots level. We're just motivated. We're here because we're motivated, and we're trying to tackle amongst us this kind of complicated problem of how do you optimize learning under different conditions, different circumstances, and different people. Do you think the wider public has an appreciation of these issues, and B, do you think our politicians have a sufficient understanding of these issues? You know, research and these partnerships, in a way, they're expensive. They cost time, but actually to do them at scale, they cost money. I'm interested in everyone's perspective on whether you think we have the right structures in place politically, maybe at the federal level, to be supporting these kinds of endeavours, and whether you think that the public, broader public, have a good awareness of these kinds of challenges. It's open to anyone.
I wanted to get really cranky about research earlier, but I'll hold my fire
Get
and
cranky
say
now.
this one. I'll get cranky now. Yeah, look, I actually do think there are a lot of prevailing forces that prevail against us in education, and I think you know, even our own top level ministerial corporations and authorities such as ACARA and AITSL and now Aero, they're not necessarily all on the same page either. And that makes it incredibly difficult for us down at the school level. You know, Aero clearly has a clearly delineated evidence base. AITSL works from an evidence base. And then we've got ACARA. But teachers must use that curriculum and must make sense of it. And the schools here know what the great pedagogical techniques are. And then you've got a curriculum that's almost working against you, but you must follow it. So yes, I think there are some, I would say government doesn't necessarily understand And I think it's quite a glaring anomaly that we don't actually have any educators at those ministerial meetings where those really big decisions are made. It's a feed up process up through the ranks. I think that is a significant issue in the country, because until that changes, we're probably going to have government bodies telling us different things, and we're trying to figure out how to pull it all together in schools. So yeah, I just got cranky. You could hear it in my voice. Couldn't you? I'll
That's
stop
good.
now.
And I know Chase has something to add as well.
Yeah, I think especially even in general in the research space, education research is undervalued. In this year's Early Career Researcher Fellowship outcomes, education researchers represented, I think, in the bottom 3% of all fellowships granted. So I think there is a massive underfunding in general, or support, or perceived value in education research. But I also think some of that onus is on us as researchers in communicating the huge impact that we can have and the value of our research. And I think, hopefully these things are changing. I know that ARC, the Australian Research Council, is now supporting things like industry fellowships that, try and link up research with industry, kind of like what we're doing here. So hopefully, possibly success from those newer schemes will highlight the potential impact that education with industry can have.
Maybe one final, I knew this would open up a can of worms. Please go ahead.
I know nothing about politics, but what I know is that there's something wrong in policy and the people who are deciding what happens in curriculum when we have a 50% high stakes single instance exam measuring capacity for a year. There's something wrong that's happening there, where the structure of the curriculum and the examination looks like that, which is the total opposite of what we know learning looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe actually we could have one final comment from maybe Rodo. You happy to say something from an industry perspective about that question I raised before?
Yeah, I guess when I look at politics and I look at resource companies, it's largely dollar driven. And I don't think people truly understand, or governments and organisations, the return on the investment in this space. And this is probably something that we need to build up a better narrative around, that return on the investment, because this is important. This will make a difference. But I don't think that's really well appreciated when you talk from a government point of view and from an industry point of view.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. Well, look, we're quickly running out of time. Steph, I believe we have, well, first and foremost, please join me in thanking our expert panel. And I believe we have some gifts for our panel members as well. You have your goodie bags as well. So I think we're going to hand those out. And then before everyone disappears, I know that Anne-Marie Carroll is keen to just say a few words in closing.